think I see it going right across my deck here now. I did not run up in his vicinity, but no, I didn't. So this is good too, Roger. Thanks for that information, sir, and I'll get back to you if we come up with anything. Over.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Breakers, a podcast about shipwrecks, loss, and lessons learned from maritime disasters. My name's Taylor. I'll be one of your hosts today. Tanner will be joining me as always, but we may have a special treat for you, so stay tuned. Before we do that, shout out a couple patrons. We got a couple new people. We have Jay Suman and Andrew. Thank you very much. I can only assume it's Prince Andrew that signed up for that.
I hope he has not listened to previous episodes of the show.
That voice you're hearing is Tanner. And Tanner, who else do we have with us today?
We've got our most illustrious guest, Kaylee, back for more.
Hey! Hi, everybody. I heard it was a Great Lakes episode, and I appeared.
Don't know how she got the invitation, but she's here.
I think she's infiltrated our private communications, our signal chat.
I sent you guys the Zencaster link.
We hexethed it.
In your walls, guesting on your podcast.
Yes.
Yes, fan favorite Kaylee is back for another one. I feel like Kaylee's been a guest on every season, at least every season that we have had guests on. I don't know if we had any in our first season. But that's good. That's always a fun time. It's fun to get back to the Great Lakes.
I feel like we have to every so often go back to the Great Lakes stuff, because I feel like that's, even though that wasn't our first episode, I feel like that's what really inspired us to make this podcast.
Much like the Ogier in the Wheel of Time, if they spend too much time away from their steading, they start to physically weaken.
And luckily for you guys, there's one or two shipwrecks in the Great Lakes.
Right. So, as always, we'll do a little media check-in before we get started. And because we're nice, guests go first.
Yeah, for me, it's mostly just been a lot of women's basketball now that the WNBA season's going.
Nice.
Not this men's playoffs, but last men's playoffs. I jumped on the Timberwolves bandwagon, which if you follow me on Twitter, you watched that happen. And I just kind of stayed on it through the Lynx season. And now we're back around for another one. And oh boy, are they good. So I'm very much enjoying watching the Minnesota Lynx.
Nice.
I've been watching a good amount of WNBA as well. I picked the Chicago Sky as my team last year because they drafted Camila Cardoso, and I had watched her a lot in college. But they have some fun players to watch. They have Angel Reese, who, if nothing else, gets talked about a lot. They're pretty terrible as a team. They have 2 wins, or they have 3 wins, 2 of them coming against Dallas, and then they just beat Connecticut the other day. But yeah, I've enjoyed watching the WNBA.
I've definitely watched more than I ever have in the past.
It's so fun.
I'm a little lucky, I guess, that the Fever happened to be my home team from where I live, so I'm jumping on the Caitlin Clark bandwagon. But
racist.
But I will also say Caitlin Clark has gotten me to watch more women's basketball than I've ever watched, so it's working.
Line go up. Everybody loves it.
I will say, as someone watching basketball, it's like basketball's never really been my favorite sport to watch, but I can say that I enjoy watching the gameplay in the WNBA because I don't know as much about basketball on a tactical level, and I find that the WNBA is easier to follow and pay attention to what they're doing and the plays they're running. It seems like there's more solid fundamentals that I can actually follow and see, okay, this is what's happening. So I do enjoy that from a sporting perspective.
Oh yeah, it definitely feels more they're all more ethical across the board. They're shooting less free throws, which is it's fun to watch the game.
Mm-hmm. I'll go next. Let's see. Started a new book. It is From the River to the Sea by John Sedgwick.
Palestine, hurrah!
Not that river, not that sea.
Oh, okay.
So it actually kind of explores what happens after we do the first Continental Railroad and kind of how that one, although that wasn't very economically successful, it kind of laid this path for these railroads that come later. And then it gets into the settlement of the West and all the good things that happened with that.
from the river to the sea, brackets, evil.
Brackets, train.
Yeah. It's pretty interesting, though. I've been reading a lot about the Native American histories, and it's been a while since I've kind of read from the other perspective. So you get a lot more out of it when you are seeing both sides there. And it's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Then outside of that, we took the kids to see How to Train Your Dragon. I thought it was pretty good. I didn't hate it. I don't think I ever saw the first, like the animated one.
This is a live action one.
Yes, it's like
real
little
dragons.
It's like little kid Game of Thrones, basically. It was fun though. I didn't feel like we wasted our $12 a ticket
Nice.
to go see that. Definitely better than I was expecting. I think sometimes those like live action movies can come off as so like lifeless and kind of uncanny, but this didn't really have that feeling. What about you?
I finished the novel Redburn by Herman Melville. It's one of his earlier books. It was published, I think, in 1849. It's like 2 years before Moby Dick. And I think it's fun to read like earlier, lesser known works from an author when you've read their bigger, more popular ones, because you kind of get to see them play with ideas that they will use again later and kind of like polish and present in maybe a more memorable or more effective way. Like most notably in Redburn, there's a spot where they get off the boat in Liverpool, and he's describing like all of the basically the kind of shadow economy around the docks of like, oh, as soon as these sailors get off the boat, you have all these guys immediately trying to, rid them of their money. You've got like pawnbrokers, and you've got all kinds of, these sort of shadier types. And he makes this comparison between them and sharks, which to anyone who's read Moby Dick, one of like the most famous metaphors from Moby Dick is the scene where they're butchering the whales. And he talks about, oh, if you flipped these planes of the humans on the boat and the sharks in the water, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. And so you can see him sort of playing with that shark metaphor. Melville's, I really like his writing. He's weirdly like, he's very progressive for the time he's writing, writing in like the 1830s, 1840s, when it comes to, things of like equality, civil rights. But then again, product of his time, he will occasionally drop something that's just like insanely offensive in the middle of this. He'll be talking about how like all humans are one, and how, the United States certainly doesn't do a very good job living up to the ideals laid out in the Declaration of Independence. And then he'll have a line where he'll be like, he looked upon me with the eye of a pawnbroker or a Jew. And it's like, okay, work to do there. This is a work in progress. But I've enjoyed the Melville that I've read.
Nice. Also
been listening to a relatively new podcast, the Adnan Hussein Show. Adnan Hussein is one of the hosts of Guerrilla History, and he's had his own podcast for a while. This is kind of a new iteration of it. He focuses. He's a scholar of, I think specifically medieval Islamic history, and so that's kind of the lens that he presents things through. But he looks at all aspects and time periods. It's focused mainly on the history of the Islamic world. 2 episodes in particular, given the times we're living through right now, that I thought I'd point out. They're both pretty early episodes. One of them is called Divide and Conquer, Abusing History to Inflame Sunni Shia Sectarianism. That one was featuring Mehmet Ali Arslan. In that one, they talked a lot about kind of the long history of flare-ups in kind of the divisions between Sunni and Shia, and how those things are largely politically motivated rather than religiously motivated. So they talked a lot about the conflict in Syria and how Turkey sort of intervened to sort of tip the scales there. And then another one, particularly relevant to literally today, literally right now when we're recording, is called Iran's History and Geopolitical Relations, featuring Professor David Yacoubian, as we are currently ramping up for another running back the old Iraq playbook with weapons of mass destruction in Iran. Figure it's a relevant episode for sort of seeing why exactly is it that Iran is sort of the target of all of this hate from both sides of the aisle in the U.S. government. What is it about Iran that drives America so crazy?
It brings us together.
In a weird way, in a terrible way, yes, it does. So yes, I figured those, listen to the whole series. They're all great. He's got a great set of guests that he has on there. But those two, I thought in particular for right now, are very good listens.
Yeah, I'll have to check those out. I've not listened to that. Okay, well, before they yell at us to stick to boats and get on with it, I guess we'll talk about boats. So to set the stage for this episode, let's go back to 1844. Iron ore has been discovered on the southern shore of Lake Superior by a survey team led by William Burt. So despite this excitement, the immediate problem... What'd you say? Bill Burt.
I said Bill Burt.
Bill Burt.
This is a Marquette range? Is that where we're talking?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
So despite the excitement, the immediately apparent problem is how are we going to get this ore to the smelters in the city in the southern portion of the lakes? This area that they find it in is very sparsely populated, not really worth it to run a bunch of rail lines up there and actually build infrastructure. Fortunately, you got some really big lakes right there, just asking to be sailed on.
Phew.
That's great for anyone planning to start a shipwrecks podcast about 200-ish years later.
It really is.
It
worked out really well for us. Naturally, the other option would be to travel by water, but the lower lakes are inaccessible from Superior due to rapids on the St. Mary's River. From Bruce Bowlus, writing in Bold Experiments, The Evolution of the Great Lakes Ore Carrier.
In 1855, the Michigan state locks neutralized the rapids. Although congressmen from the Northwest had made repeated pleas for financial aid from Washington since 1839, sectional friction in Congress blocked aid. Eventually, a compromise gave 750,000 acres of federal land in Michigan's northern peninsula to the state for sale to underwrite the construction.
Designers planned the locks, each 350 feet long and 70 feet wide, anticipating few, if any, changes to ship design in the future. Still, according to its promoters, the canal threw open the region to trade in fish, lumber, copper, and other minerals. Something I did want to add there, because when I found that quote in the Bowlus article, it did point out, you had just been talking about the native side of things as it relates to, the expanding American infrastructure. This land, I believe something like 2 years prior to the discovery of this ore, this land had been signed over in a treaty from the Ojibwe of the area, I believe, which is how that federal land came to be sitting there.
Are you saying politics had an influence on shipping and transportation?
That doesn't sound real.
People are saying it.
Weird.
Also, I like how it says the Michigan state locks neutralized the rapids. It makes it sound like they blew it up with dynamite.
I mean, a little bit.
They probably did to some degree.
And that's it.
That's not how they built the Sioux locks.
Target
I'm sure there was
neutralized.
dynamite involved.
The pictures of those early locks are just so crazy, too.
Well, I like how also it's like, 350 feet.
Yeah, that's good.
That should do it.
They won't never make it.
Certainly will never think of another idea.
It would be insane to build a bigger ship than this.
So as America becomes more industrialized and connected post-Civil War, you really see an explosion in the rail network. Kind of, again, what I'm reading about in From the River to the Sea. Brackets evil.
Inshallah.
So the rail network does eventually reach up into this ore mining region. However, what's more efficient than rail? Big ships. So big ships still remain the dominant method for moving large quantities of ore south.
Shippers ignored railroads in favor of lake vessels because of economics. Railroads were too expensive. Granted, railroads had improved their efficiency during the previous 20 years with an average charge per ton mile of 0.00879. But lake boats could carry iron ore the 600 miles between Marquette and Cleveland in 1880 at a per ton mile cost of 0.00417, less than half the charge.
Cost line go down.
Those 0.00417, that is out of $1.
Yeah, per ton per mile.
Okay. So what is that, like 0.879 cents we're talking here?
Yeah.
Per ton mile.
Talk about enough tons and enough miles, though, and that starts to add up.
What a deal.
This is dangerously close to the work that I do at my real job. Don't like it. So through the middle of the 19th century, the schooner-rigged wooden hold vessel is what you're going to see most commonly on the lakes. Obviously, size and design would vary wildly within that. Larger vessels are typically owned by a company or a group of investors, while smaller cargo vessels could be owned by local communities or by an individual captain. We've probably talked about both, really, on here at various points. I can't think of any examples off the top of my head, but
The kind of nostalgia for the days when you could do like a mom and pop ore carrier.
mhm,
You don't really see
I mean,
that
that's
anymore.
kind of what whalebacks were, at least in
right.
the beginning.
We kind of we talked about that a little bit in our last bonus episode. We talked about privateers. In the old days, you could, if you had some money, you could buy and outfit a privateer just as like a private citizen. And then as ships get more expensive to arm and to build, this kind of needs to be like a national enterprise, like a corporate enterprise. You can't really do that. Also, very convenient with all these schooners on the lakes because schooner is a great word for people to say from Wisconsin and Minnesota. I think schooner is a wonderful
Schooner.
word for that accent.
That's why Spooner, Wisconsin is my favorite town in
Spooner.
Wisconsin.
Oh, I'm just going to squeeze this schooner right by you there.
Sail my
city of-
schooner to spooner.
Yeah.
You can't sail your schooner to spooner.
There's several big changes that are coming to the industry, though. One is the era of propulsion. Sail-powered vessels were, of course, reliant on nature to, make their time schedule and things like that. In logistics, we don't like that. We want to know when something's going to be there, not count on the wind. So, with the introduction of steam-powered vessels, you can change that. Steam-powered vessels would first appear on the lakes in the early 1800s, but there's a lot of need for machinery. You have to have fuel bunker space. They're not really designed for maximizing your cargo space. And there's also there's the mechanical component to that. It's just like when you buy a fancier car, there's just more that can break.
Everything's touchscreen.
Yeah,
I was just going to say the
your new
touchscreens
schooner.
and the steam-powered vessels are
Nothing's
hard
tactile.
to replace.
Does that have wireless Apple Play in your schooner, or it's an Android schooner?
The propulsion aspect of this is interesting, and how using sail, you're reliant on the winds and the weather a lot more. And this is an interesting time in history, the sort of middle to getting into the late 1800s, because this is also when you really sort of develop the concept of universally accepted time.
Mhm.
Time zones, I think, are invented in invented. It's in the 1870s and 80s, because it's with the building of rail networks, suddenly it does actually matter what time it is to people,
Right.
and it needs to be the same time or an understood time at both the departure and the destination. We lost our natural animal innocence right around this time, I think, as humans.
In addition to these new designs in propulsion, we've got to make some changes to kind of capitalize on that, because you have to capitalize for capitalism.
Of course.
There's some changes that we need to make. We'll kind of dig into that in a minute. Some of the changes that we'll see to the vessels. However, another obstacle to efficiency was the method of loading and unloading cargo.
Once safely moored, unloading operations commenced. This was a tedious, time-consuming process since lake boats often carried a surprising variety of cargo. Those faced with unloading bulk cargoes like iron ore had a particularly daunting task. In any case, the men assigned to unload a boat, which often include the ship's crew, had to work around the rigging or other sailing equipment. Employing the ship's spars and even horses on occasion to help lift cargo out of the hold had limited application because of the lines. It's kind of hilarious to think about horses when now you got the Mark W. Barker, that new interlake boat that has a front loader shovel thing that just drives around in the cargo hold.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That is really cool. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, since they handle a lot of salt, it helps push it into the area that turns into the self-unloader. Yeah.
It's also important to remember that when we talk about unloading bulk freight like iron ore, This is being done by hand with shovels.
Oh,
This is like an
sucks.
incredibly manual process.
That sucks.
Oh my god.
See, another thing to remember is that even with the increasingly modernized transport network that is going on here in the final decades of the 19th century, the overwhelming majority of these ships on the Great Lakes are still made out of wood.
Builders found great stands of white oak for the hull and pine for masts and spars along the lake shore. Although wood was an ideal material for the construction of the standard Great Lakes sailing ship, it had limitations when building steam vessels.
The weight of a steam engine and boilers amidships placed a tremendous downward strain on the wooden hulls at that point. Furthermore, wood was heavy, making efforts to use it to reinforce hulls amidships counterproductive. In the end, the weight of wood, coupled with its inflexibility and bulkiness, limited the size of lake vessels.
All of that done, we now have the stage set for the main discussion, our main topic for the day, the R.J. Hackett. R.J. Hackett was built in 1869 by Peck and Masters in Cleveland, Ohio. She was initially considered very unconventional due to her wide cross-section and long, unobstructed amidship hold. So, sounds like more efficient, basically. Like, it's a better use of space is what's so unique about this vessel.
Sure.
This is disrupting the industry.
Yes, they are moving fast. They are breaking things. This design quickly proves successful. It quickly becomes the standard to what you think like a classic Great Lakes freighter looks like, not the stupid ones they started building in the 70s.
Get them.
I just want it to look like it's supposed to look. That's all.
I agree with you. 1,000-footers are abominations, but that's okay.
Before we discuss the freighter, let's dig into the background of its creator, Elihu M. Peck. He is born in Butternuts, New York in 1822.
Yeah, of course he was.
I have to look this up. Where is this place?
Is that still a town? Please tell me that's still a town.
Butternuts. It sure is. Well, maybe.
It's where you guys can do the live show.
It's in Otsego County.
I've been there. I've been there before.
Huh. And you didn't go to Butternuts?
I probably went through it on the way to the little lakes, one of the little lakes they had up there.
I'm just sorry. I'm just thinking about she's got a great body. It's Butternuts. Also, it sounds like something that you would say in like the 30s or 40s to avoid swearing.
Oh, Butternuts.
Oh, Butternuts.
Oh, Butternuts.
Oh, Butternuts, Pa.
So he would start out as a ship's carpenter at age 16. He would apprentice in Cleveland under Philo Moses. We need to bring names like this back. We've got some awesome names here early on. In 1845, he would marry Susan Edding Rogers. They would have 2 children who both, like Kesha, wanted to die young.
Is that what she says in the song? Is that the premise of the song?
Said, like, we're gonna die young? No. I was proud of that when I typed that.
I don't know that she wants to.
Well, they did. That's what happened to them.
We're going to. Yeah.
She says, "Oh, this is a simple fact." Though.
Yeah, let's make the most of the night because we're gonna die young.
Ah, there we go. See.
So because both of his children died young, this freed Peck up for his true love, work.
Phew.
He was a man about that grind set.
Mm-hmm.
He would open up his own shipyard in Cleveland in 1847 at age 25. I think what's interesting here is usually these characters we talk about start out as like a cabin boy or something. Mm-hmm. Like he gets straight into the design phase like right away.
So at age 16, he's a ship's carpenter, and by age 25, he has enough money to open his own shipyard.
Times were easier in 1847 in Cleveland, I guess.
Yes.
It's a time of rapid expansion. He was pulling himself up by his bootstraps.
Yeah, big times in the Cleve.
Primary focus of his operation was actually to repair rather than design new vessels. So that might also be a little bit of the reason like why he has his own firm so early, is he's not building them, he's repairing them.
he's probably kicking around these designs in his head. So I like to imagine him making little tweaks to the boats that he's fixing. Ad hoc, just like, hey, I'm going to try it this way instead, and then having to tell him to like put it back the way it was.
He definitely seems like one of those guys who's kind of a little bit of a dreamer type. Eventually, he would construct a vessel, which he named the Jenny Lind, which, thanks to The Greatest Showman, I think I know who she is.
I was just gonna say same one.
Who is that?
I think
She's
she's
like
a
an opera
Swedish
singer, right?
opera singer. And I know I remember the scene in the movie because it happens in Cincinnati.
Oh,
I remember
wait.
the scene in the movie because she doesn't sing fucking opera. Oh my god, that pissed me off so bad.
They may have mentioned her in the No Gods, No Mares episode on P.T. Barnum.
I bet they did.
She might have come up there. Jenny Lind and the sister vessel John Walker Lind.
Ah, yes.
It's a deep cut reference.
That's a deep cut for the people that get it.
Some of you younger listeners out there might want to give him a goog.
The Jenny Lind featured a blunt bow and an almost square cross section. So this is that innovative design we're talking about to maximize cargo space. This is contrasting to what you'd think of on like a schooner with that raked bow. It definitely looks a lot more elegant than this, but it's not as efficient. We can see that Peck's playing around with some concepts here, and that he's not satisfied with the status quo that he's seeing, but he also hasn't quite fully developed what his new design is going to be.
He's throwing spaghetti at the wall.
Right. Like he's finally being like, oh, people aren't yelling at me for this one, so this one might work.
This is just like we talked about with Melville, trying things out, out these themes, and then returning to them later when they're polished and you know that they're going to be a success.
Peck was apparently not content just sitting behind a desk, however, and he would become the captain of the vessel Fountain City, which was also an iron ore carrier. I think that's interesting that he does it in reverse. Like he decides to become a captain after he's designing ships.
I do think that's also maybe an interesting way for him to sort of see what kind of issues do these types of vessels have? How can these issues be maybe resolved?
Yeah, he definitely seems like an inquisitive person.
Or maybe he was just bored. I don't know.
He could have been.
God forbid a man have a hobby.
Right. His hobby wasn't his kids. In 1855, Peck would form a partnership with Irvin U. Master. This established Peck and Masters. Unlike his previous venture, this company's main focus would be on building new vessels. The firm was apparently pretty profitable, and it was noted for its high-quality work. This reputation was so important to Peck that even after Masters died in 1866, Peck kept his name on to keep the full name due to the recognition within the industry.
Yeah, I mean, that would have been pretty shitty to just drop his name once he died, I think.
It's just Peck. Peck, like many businessmen of his day, did not confine himself to a single industry. He had a variety of interests. He would serve as the president of People's Gas Light Company of Cleveland and the director of the Savings and Loan Association. So he's got his hands in a few different things.
The company that gaslights the people of Cleveland.
It's called the Browns.
You didn't take out a loan. Crazy.
I just love that he's hit that level of wealth where you just get to be on the boards of different companies and just kind of exist. That's fun.
The American dream.
This man has hit the American dream.
Yeah. Just to think, and he's just a innocent boy from Butternuts.
It's just a boy from Butternuts. So he was involved in politics as well, serving as a delegate to the Republican Convention in 1855. And being elected Waterworks Commissioner in 1867. If he's a Republican in 1855, isn't that fairly early on in the party's founding?
On balance, this is when the Republicans were the good ones, more or less.
Yeah, I mean, this is contemporary of Lincoln.
Yeah. Waterworks Commissioner. That's a fun title.
Means he cries a lot.
I was going to say, it sounds like an insult.
They work with the gaslighting company, actually.
It's a biting insult that someone would use in an anonymous letter in the early 1800s about their rival.
He's the Waterworks Commissioner.
He should be elected Waterworks Commissioner.
So overall, he was known as a firm but fair man with an unconventional attitude for tackling problems.
Single combat.
Also seems like he was a pretty fair employer. During slow periods, he would build ships on speculation to keep his builders employed. So as far as a business tycoon in the 1800s goes, he sounds like he was like the Mark Cuban of the group.
Republican business owner, brackets good.
Brackets good. So this brings us to the R.J. Hackett itself. Peck would find himself riding high in 1869. Peck and Masters had maintained their strong reputation while building over 50 new vessels, the largest of which was the Nebraska, built in 1867. Until this point, all the firm's work had been fairly conventional, with the exception of the experimental Jenny Lind. But as we've established, Peck is not an idle guy. He still has these ideas on how to improve his vessels, and this would manifest itself in a radically unconventional design for his next vessel. In order to do this, Peck was looking to take on an investor and a partner. He found that man in Captain Robert J. Hackett of Detroit, Michigan. Spoiler alert, the new vessel is named R.J. Hackett. How much do you think he paid him less, though, to put his name on there? Or is that just the sweetener to get the deal done? He's like, I'll name it after you.
Did he ever have any ships named after himself?
I didn't look. I didn't see one mentioned anywhere, but I would have to imagine.
That's an integrity move, if not.
Oh, yeah.
So they designed and built the vessel on speculation, launching it on November 16th, 1869 in Cleveland. She was 208 feet long, had a 32-foot beam, and a draft of just over 12 feet. Drawing on its previous work with the Jenny Lind, the Hackett featured a boxy hull to increase its cargo capacity. There's a lot of things that go into making the Hackett unique beyond just that. Her engines are located in the far aft of the vessel, connecting to a propeller. She's also originally had 2 masts, later 3, which could be rigged for sail. And then these can also be used in that manual unloading process as well. And then perhaps the biggest change is that the deckhouse is split between the bow and the stern, with the galley and crew quarters sat aft, and the captain's cabin and pilot house sat near the bow.
And this is what ultimately gives us the setup for stories like the Matuszak, I think, was one, and then various other ships during the Great Lakes Storm, where you have 2 worlds at either end of the ship, where in the stern, the crew is all freezing to death, and in the bow, everyone is just fine.
Wild to me that they thought of the front and back split, but then the interior tunnels didn't come until the William A. Irvin, the one that's a museum ship in Duluth. That was the first one that had interior tunnels.
It is funny that they didn't think about that part. Nah, they'll be fine walking over there.
Yeah, use the lifeline.
I think it'd be cool if there was one of those early ideas for, well, how could we do this? How could we have some sort of way to get from the bow to the stern? They had one of those pneumatic tubes, at the bank.
At a bank.
I guess it'd be more like one of those salmon things that they put the salmon in to shoot them.
Shoot them, yeah, over a dam. So the result of this design is that it creates a huge space between the 2 superstructures for a large open hold. If you're lucky enough to have ever been on one of these vessels, which I think all of us have, and you stand down at the bottom of those holds, you realize exactly how massive they are. I think it was the Irvin there in Duluth that I went on, and it was pretty wild being down in that space.
Yeah, those holds are huge, and the Irvin has 3 holds, so it's not just the one big open one. And they're all.
I think enormous. That is legitimately the spookiest haunted house thing I've ever been to.
Oh, and that thing's haunted too. Don't even get me started.
That's cool. It's quote unquote legit haunted? Are there ghost stories about it?
When I was a tour guide there, I would always make the joke of we're haunted year round, not just in October.
Yeah, I can only imagine the weird noises that one would hear when it was quiet there. This massive space could be easily accessed via lines of hatches, which would facilitate easier loading at an ore dock. Everybody loves hatches on the Great Lakes. I feel like most of the newer Great Lakes stories we talk about involve hatch covers.
I'm a big hatch head, I would say.
The forward pilot house would also offer a dramatically better, plane of visibility for the captain. This is pretty clutch considering some of the ports these vessels were visiting were pretty small. It's not the same as international sailing and stuff. Like some of these little Great Lake ports were literally just the ore dock and not much else. Like many new ideas, the Hackett is not immediately embraced. With no buyer that can be found, Peck and Hackett take matters into their own hands. They would form the Northwest Transportation Company. They're joined by Captain Hackett's brother and a man named Harvey Brown, who was an agent for the Jackson Iron Company. The mine for this company is located in
Negani.
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 That's how I've heard it.
I'm going with that one. The mine was located in Negani, Michigan. That's on the Upper Peninsula. The Jackson Iron Company would go on to exist until 1905 when it's bought by Cleveland Cliffs. So you're kind of seeing like a lot of these magnates kind of have their hands in like all areas here. If you own a mine, why not own a ship to move your iron ore? The Hackett would end up making her first trip in the spring of 1870. So kind of digging into her early life here, with a speed of 12 miles per hour, she's faster than a similar sized sailing vessel, with the added bonus that she's able to carry large volumes of cargo. Kind of hit at it on the top, but as with many great inventions, the timing is critical. With the ramping up of Michigan and later Minnesota, iron ore mining, there's a ton of demand for ore to be moved. So this is a really fortuitous time to come up with a better way to move iron ore. The benefits of this design rapidly becoming apparent. The race is on to build more of these efficient vessels. Within 25 years, this design would actually make up a majority of the freighters on the Great Lakes. This design's so good that the transition from wooden-hulled vessels to modern, that it made the transition from wooden-hulled vessels to the modern steel vessels that we still see today. It's like, again, the classic silhouette that we associate with Great Lakes shipping. I think that is interesting that it is such a unique design that you don't see really very many other places, that it is like such a Great Lakes thing.
And that was the standard for what, like 100 years? Yeah.
I mean, I think I looked it up that what was it, the 70s, I think, when they start building the ones that just look like super tankers. Oh, I actually have that. That's the next part of my notes here. The newest crop of vessels, those built in the 70s and on, have begun to move away from this design and look much more like a traditional saltwater freighter with a single deck house located near the stern. Boo. Boring.
Uninspired.
Let's see. So more experiments. What's better than one ship full of iron ore? 2 ships full of iron ore.
Hooray!
So Peck experimented with the Hackett towing the schooner Forest City. The schooner was essentially the very similar design to the Hackett, but it was not powered by engines. And this is a concept that we'll see, quite a bit. I think there's probably a 30, 40-year time period where you see a lot of these barges being hauled and stuff. But you're effectively doubling the capacity of the Hackett, i.e. line go up.
Mm-hmm. Matafa.
Somewhere to put the more troublesome members of your crew so you can cut them loose in a storm if needed.
Yeah, which one was that? I'm blanking on the name.
Matafa.
Yeah, just get rid of it. Just cut it off.
Well, I guess the mirror too. Yeah.
What was the other one we did?
We did one off of it was in Superior. It was
Miztech? Is that the name of it?
I want to say that's right. Because yes, we definitely talked about one where the barge just gets cut loose and they just don't see it again. Ever.
But then that ship sank in the same area 15 years later. So it was kind of Final Destination on that one.
Yeah, we have so many episodes, I forget which one is which.
It is so hard to remember. So with the concept proven, the Forest City would actually be equipped with engines in 1871, and she would begin to tow her own barge. So barges are beautiful. As we've established, Peck was not one to rest on his previous achievements. He would slowly withdraw from shipbuilding and ultimately dissolve the firm in 1872. At that time, he would move his home from Cleveland to Detroit. Can you imagine someone making that move today? Be like, no, do I have to?
Lateral move.
Lateral move. This is mainly so he could focus his efforts on the Northwest Transportation Company. This would actually grow to be one of the largest fleets on the Great Lakes. He would hold the position of president in the company until he died on May 8th, 1896. So the Hackett carries on through a couple different owners throughout her life, and she also undergoes a variety of upgrades and changes. So in 1881, the vessel had a third mast installed, along with a second deck, which would raise her height by 6 feet and 4 inches. So, sounds like some pretty substantial work, actually.
Is that increasing hold space, do you think?
I don't know. It wasn't super clear if they just added more crew compartments or something, or if it was actually to raise it everything up to increase the space. But it sounded like some pretty heavy upgrades were done there. In 1883, the vessel was upgraded by the Detroit Dry Dock Engine Works with a steeple compound engine, which probably means something to someone but doesn't mean a lot to me.
Probably saw something like that when we went to the Henry Ford Museum in Detroit.
Probably.
They had a lot of big engines. It was a cool visit if you ever are in Detroit.
I have a friend who recently moved there, so I will need Detroit.
It's not just car stuff. It's lots of other stuff, too.
Yeah.
A lot of old furniture. There's a lot of old farming equipment. There's a lot of trains. They have planes.
Automobiles.
They have the car that JFK was shot in.
Do they actually?
Yeah.
Why?
They had the chair that Lincoln was shot in.
Why?
No,
Why do they have that?
They have a lot of things that presidents were shot in.
Sure. You're making it sound like House on the Rock or something.
I know.
It's very cool. It's a diverse array of stuff that they have collected there.
Something for everyone.
Actually, I'm kind of curious now. I might have to make this trip at some point.
It's a really good visit.
So in 1889, the boiler would be replaced. That to me, pretty standard, maintenance. And obviously these vessels last a long time, as Great Lakes vessels tend to. In 1892, the vessel is sold to Northwest Transport. It is sold by Northwest Transport to Vulcan Transportation Company, who would later sell the vessel in 1905 to Captain H.C. McCallum. So you've kind of seen this vessel as it gets older, it ends up with an individual owner after being part of a big corporate fleet. It trickles down.
He goes, I'll buy it.
Let's talk about the reason why we're here. The wreck. On November 12th, 1905, the vessel's steaming from Cleveland to Marinette, Wisconsin, loaded with a cargo of 1,200 tons of coal. She is sailing under the command of Captain H.C. McCallum.
Since we were talking about sort of the infrastructure networks, I think it's worth pointing out, we've probably mentioned it at some point, but for a lot of these ships, I know when they would take ore down the lakes, to deposit it so that they could get to places like Pittsburgh, on the way back up, they would usually carry coal or sometimes grain, because that's what people needed up more closer this way.
It's an interesting change because pretty much all coal shipments are downbound now.
That is interesting.
Coming out of here. By here, I mean Duluth Superior.
I guess some of that is where the coal is coming from. That back in the day, it was coming from Appalachia, and now it all comes from Wyoming.
Yeah, it's Western coal now.
the clean
coal.
Let's see here. Marinette, Wisconsin is right on the border, separated from Menominee, Michigan, by the Menominee River. The closest town of note in this area is Peshtigo, about 5 miles southwest of Marinette.
So yeah, all that's pretty close to us. We go through.
I was going to say,
Peshtigo
this
when
is in
we-
your neck of the woods, isn't it?
Peshtigo is those fires, right?
Yes,
Ah.
that's why it's notable. Otherwise, it really wouldn't be.
Mm.
But yeah, actually, when I was looking through some newspaper stuff that we'll get to later. These late 1800s local Wisconsin papers, and there's actually quite a few references still in the 1880s to areas that they're developing or redeveloping because stuff that was there before was just totally destroyed in this fire. So it's like had a massive impact on the region, that fire.
All right, so early in the morning, with a Hackett off of Michigan's Cedar River, it's about 20 miles northeast of her destination, a fire breaks out in the crew quarters. It doesn't sound like there was a definitive cause, but it sounds like smoking, though. Smoking kills. Don't do it.
I do like, though, like when you do see stuff in newspapers about this, like these really early ones, there's never any sort of investigation. There's not any sort of it's like what happened. It's like, well, it caught on fire and it sank.
It burned.
And that's it.
Especially in this, spoiler alert, in this case, with no loss of life. I feel like it was like, that's what insurance is for.
Yep.
So it quickly became apparent that this fire was not controllable. Within minutes, the fire was already spreading to the engine room. And as we know, that's not good.
You don't want water in the engine room. You don't
generally
want
no.
fire in the engine room.
You don't want fire near the coal. Mm-mm.
The only of the elements that you want in the engine room is air. Earth, I don't know that you would really want too much of that in your engine room.
No, that belongs in the cargo hold. Earth goes in the cargo hold.
Unless you're counting coal, I guess.
Yeah, true. So Captain McCallum acted, quickly and well, and made way for the nearby Whaleback Reef. Yay, whalebacks mentioned.
Sometimes referred to as Whaleback Shoal.
This is off of Washington Island, Wisconsin, in Green Bay. I don't think we went to Washington Island. I remember one time we were in Door County and thought about it, and we just didn't take the ferry.
It's sort of in Green Bay. It's like the border of Green Bay.
Yeah.
Is Washington Island the one that's across the Death's Door?
Yeah, it's right. It's off the tip of Door County.
I've always wanted to go there.
We like the times that we've gone to Door County, every time we're like, oh, we should finally take the ferry to Washington Island. And it's either just like we don't feel like it or it's bad weather. It's usually the weather that is why we don't want to take the ferry. But
you don't want to cross Death's Door when the weather's bad? Why?
There's a bookstore there on the island that we've still never been to. It's like I don't know that it's actually good or if it's just the novelty of the location. But that is somewhere that is like relatively close and would be easy to get to by comparison, but we've just never been.
I've always wanted to go to that bar they have there where you can do the shot of bitters and then be in like the bitters club.
Bitter nuts.
No. Yeah. Bitter.
There you go.
So the captain is able to safely strand the vessel on the shoal before the fire consumes the entire ship. The crew of 13 are able to safely evacuate via lifeboat. So, yay, lifeboats. Like it seems like in this case, they actually worked. How about that? The crew is promptly picked up by a fishing tug named Stuart Edward. I don't like the two first names.
Edward Stewart would. Well,
that sounds way better.
It does, and I. This is like I have no reason to think this other than the fact that the captain's name, McDonald, presumably at some point a Scotsman. It would make a lot more sense for it to be called Edward Stewart, as in named after the Stewart family. But the paper said Stuart Edward.
May I pop in the one funny fact I found that fits right about here?
Absolutely.
So apparently when they rowed away from the wreck, when it was burning, the smokestack tipped over, but it fell in such a way that it landed on the whistle rope. So the whistle just like was blowing continuously until it burned enough that it stopped.
Oh, that's like the I think the Noronic.
Yeah.
I think the fire alarm something had been tripped, and it just like the horn, the whistle, and just like blaring the whole time that this like horrific fire is raging.
We're burning to death, and this is annoying as hell.
It's really annoying.
Let me go in the flames in peace. Oh. I'll give Percy a second to get that out of his system. As you mentioned, this tug is under the command of a Captain MacDonald, who would bring the survivors to Marinette.
I think his name was Charles, but I'm not totally sure, because in this 1905 newspaper, it uses the abbreviation CHAS period, which I'm assuming is short for Charles, since like Chaz used to be a nickname for that. But I don't know. It's a weird abbreviation.
I'm questioning this newspaper between the Stuart Edward thing and that.
His name could really be anything.
Yeah, right. So the flames could be seen for miles around. The crew at the Plum Island Life-Saving Station sighted the burning Hackett around 8:15 and responded. I want to note, this is not the Plum Island that gave us Lyme disease. That is a different Plum Island.
Plum Island brackets, not Lyme disease.
Yeah.
Which Plum Island gave us Lyme disease?
I think it's the one in, well, first off, that's a conspiracy theory that I don't think is actually true.
Oh, it's like a lab leak theory?
Yeah, there's a lab on Plum Island, New York. Either New York or New Jersey. Can't remember which one. And supposedly, like, that's the conspiracy that Lyme disease is what came from there.
I have heard the internet conspiracy that, like, Lyme disease was created as, like, a bioweapon or something, even though, like, doesn't it take a really long time to suffer from the consequences of having Lyme disease?
It's like not the one you'd send if you were trying to like build a weapon.
The slow burn.
According to Wikipedia, Lyme disease was never a topic of research at Plum Island, according to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Agriculture. But I mean, what?
Yeah. Well, I believe them.
Are you going to trust them?
I don't trust the Department of Agriculture. That's for sure. Let's see here. So the crew of the life-saving station...
Hold on. Lyme disease is named after a town in Connecticut? I assumed it was named after, like, a person?
I assume that as well.
Is there a town called Lyme in Connecticut?
Yeah, Lyme is the eponym of Lyme disease. It's in New London County.
Huh.
All right.
So under the leadership of Captain... Is that Eggle?
I've been saying Eagle in my head.
That sounds cooler.
We have some good names in this episode.
Specifically, Sam Eagle.
So that's what I think of. That's exactly what I think of. In his little Coast Guard outfit. So under the leadership of Captain Eagle, the life-saving crew would reach the Hackett around 8:15. This is just as the vessel is consumed.
They sighted it at 8:15.
Sorry. At 8:15, the life-saving crew led by Captain Eagle sighted the vessel. They would respond, but the vessel had been consumed by the time they got on scene. Plum Island is actually located like in Death's Door, by the way.
It's a very pleasantly named island to be in such a unpleasantly named place.
Yeah.
Plot twist is that's actually where the ticks live. They give you Lyme disease. It's this Plum Island. The Sturgeon Bay Advocate on November 18th, 1905, notes that the station was about 11 miles away, and the life-saving station crew was already sailing into the wind.
Oof. The after part of the steamer had by this time been burned away. Captain Eagle boarded the craft and secured the papers of the captain and first officer, which will be forwarded to the persons named therein on application. The decks of the steamer were, at that time, hot from a fire that was burning beneath, and which no doubt subsequently entirely consumed the boat.
So at the time of her sinking, this is still according to the Sturgeon Bay Advocate, the R.J. Hackett is valued at $16,000 and is only insured for $12,000. The value of the coal on board is estimated to be around $3,500. So taking a little bit of a bath on that one there, Captain McCollum. I think it's interesting that I think one of the sources I read that when Captain Eagle and friends get there, like the vessel's pretty much already been consumed, but apparently like not, right? If he's able to run on board and grab the papers.
Yeah, that seems like enough of it was left.
Yeah, like so she's definitely not burned down to like the water line when they get there, but I imagine it's obvious that it's a losing battle.
Yeah.
I guess this is like the contemporary version, though. A ship that is full of coal catching on fire. I guess it is kind of the equivalent of an oil tanker. It's like it is literally full of fuel.
Yeah.
So that's not good.
Today the vessel actually still sits in shallow water. I read one of the diving guides that I have. It said it was like 10 to 14 feet.
It was like a baby dive.
How reasonable. Yeah.
Yeah, so that doesn't sound bad.
You could like snorkel that.
Yeah, like I would dive on this. I don't know, diving like 80 feet underwater seems terrifying to me.
No,
I don't want to.
You.
But 10 feet. I can handle 10 feet.
But if it comes to diving on this one, you think you could hack it?
Ah.
Oh, butternuts, I can't.
Butternuts. Is that the end of our tale here?
That's everything I have.
Because I have some more marine news from the Sturgeon Bay Advocate. On
love old newspapers.
November 18th, 1905. Well, we'll start with the marine news, and then we're going to move into personals, and then we're going to get into among farmers.
Okay.
So from the subheading picked up around the docks, we have some scuttlebutt here.
Is this just like a gossip column of like the stevedores and stuff, like at the dock?
Yeah, so it'd be interesting to note that Bob is in quotation marks, which is weird because it's like not, I don't think it's quote worthy. Bob, it makes it sound very suspicious. Bob Brooks of this port is filling the berth of purser on the steamer Charles McVeigh. Here's another interesting one. The schooner S.B. Page has been put in the beet carrying trade, and this week loaded at Egg Harbor.
The beet carrying trade?
Mm-hmm. It's a beet boat now.
It's a beet boat.
So they're on the beet?
On the beet. What else do we have coming in here from the docks? I marked a few of these. A lot of your kind of like lower level, not quite disasters, but just, little stuff that happens on the lakes. The schooner Industry, which last week waterlogged while bound to this port from Marinette with a load of timber, was on Friday pumped out, and the cargo subsequently taken out of the hold. That's good.
Good old pump out.
Industry.
All right, getting into the good stuff here. So this is from the section titled Around the Chain of Lakes. So this is slightly less local. While the crew of the fishing tug Star was lifting nets off Port Burwell, Ontario, a huge wave struck the craft and washed overboard one of the crew. The pilot house of the tug was torn off and the engine room wrecked. Doesn't say if the crew was recovered. It just says he was washed overboard.
Doesn't sound great.
That does not sound great.
The steamer Frank Rockefeller, which stranded on Isle Royale last week, has been released and was on Sunday taken to two harbors by the steamer Maritana. The boat is in bad shape. The rudder was gone and she was leaking freely. Captain C.C. Fowler, master of the steamer Chequamegon of Ashland, had his license suspended for 60 days by Grand Haven inspectors because the boat did not carry a metal lifeboat as required by law. The inspectors at Chicago suspended the license of Bernard J. McCabe, chief engineer of the steamer Maurice B. Grover of Cleveland. It's funny.
Grover Cleveland.
For having failed to follow government rules in regard to the handling of machinery on board vessels.
You mentioned Ashland, Wisconsin. I think that is my favorite little Wisconsin town that I've been to and like spent time at randomly when I was at UW Superior. So, yay for underage beers in Ashland.
All right, into the personals section here. Some of these are so funny for how mundane they are. Frank McDonald of Algoma was a Sturgeon Bay visitor between train time Monday.
Train time? Is that just like what the time the train shows up every day?
I guess when the one train arrives and the one train leaves. I don't know.
I had to know he was visiting.
Gustav Utek of Liberty Grove transacted business in the city, a part of Thursday and Friday.
It's like the worst gossip column ever.
Oh, here's the one I circled here. Judge Hamilton returned from a visit to Chicago on matters connected with the location of the post office. He was unable to say what the outcome will be.
Keeping it close to his chest.
Oh, here's what mainly for the name, I flagged this one. Mrs. Bertha Dankholer has gone to Camden, South Carolina, where she'll spend the ensuing winter with some parties from Massachusetts, who maintain a large summer hotel in the former place. The season begins in January, when the people from the cold north begin to flock down there and remain for the ensuing few months.
What was her name again?
Bertha Dankholer.
Yes,
Bertha Dankholer that has ruined some third graders' lives in like a rural Minnesota school district.
I'm just.
Oh no, you got Dankholer this year?
This is funny because one of these East Coast Massachusetts type was down on their vacation in South Carolina at the beach. And when they went back home, they were telling everybody about, oh yeah, I met this lady from Wisconsin, literally named Bertha. Could not be any more stereotypical.
I meant Bertha Dankholer.
Bertha Dankholer.
I bet they have, when I look through some of the old Duluth papers, there's a section that's like gossip of the hotels where it's literally just like verbatim overheard in the hotel bar.
Why would you print this?
Why'd you put that in the paper? And then a full roster of who's staying at which hotel.
I also love that you just announced, like, I'm not going to be home for like 6 months. I will be in South Carolina. Don't rob me, please.
William S. Reynolds and M.V. Cockums left here Thursday forenoon for Chicago. The trip as far as Green Bay being made in the automobile belonging to the former. This is the kind of stuff that would make the paper in 1905. I mean, literally, that'd be a big deal in 1905. From the ancient city, which I assume he means Green Bay?
The ancient city of Green
Titletown. From the ancient city, they go to Chicago by rail and probably will take in the football game between Wisconsin and Michigan universities on Saturday at Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Go Badgers.
All right, I've got a couple more. Ooh, here's one that's titled "Contribute to Russian Jews."
Oof.
What are we contributing?
Here's the section, among farmers. The long freight trains that go out of here daily indicates a good deal of farm produce is being shipped abroad. The forward movement of canned peas has also set in brisk of late. Socialism does not appear to find much favor with the people of this county. There are too many farmers, a class who are very greatly opposed to the idea of an equal division of property.
Yeah, we know.
Yeah, we never hear about socialist farmers.
We live that legacy every day.
There's no empirical evidence of this. There's no.
You ever hear of a co-op?
It's just.
Maybe it's one of those things where they're like, if we just say it, everyone will go, "Oh, I guess there's not any socialism."
I heard that our county wasn't cut out for socialism. The good weather of last week permitted hundreds of farmers in this county to finish up their belated plowing, and they're now prepared to go into winter quarters in a very good frame of mind. So, yeah, these lazy farmers who are behind on their plowing, yeah, they don't want to share with other people.
They don't want any socialism.
Dr. Fichtner, who is an authority on the subject, seems to favor the Guernsey as the best breed of cows for this county.
Mm-hmm.
That's some good, hard-hitting Wisconsin news right there.
Oh, yeah.
They're good milkers and are far more hardy than the Jersey, which, however, is a very good cow for dairy.
I want to say, if you're ever doing newspaper deep dives and you want to get like just some of the most gruesome like deaths you've ever seen in your life, look up the phrase "was literally," because that's when you find was literally ground to death, was literally boiled to death. It turns up the most horrifying shit.
Because back in the day when literally actually did mean literally, and they would use it that way.
Was my friend showed me one the other day where it's like was literally blown, like his legs were blown 2 acres or something.
I had one more that actually is relevant to. All the cheese factories and creameries in this county are still running on full time. The receipt of milk being exceptionally good for this time of year. Nearly all the farmers are improving the stock by the addition of new strains. The purpose being to build up the dairy to the best possible point.
New strains, like they got indica milk, sativa milk.
Okay, the one that actually was somewhat relevant here. The coal consumed in the farming districts is steadily growing greater year by year. We said that she was, hauling this coal up. And why do all these people need so much coal? Continuing here. This being more particularly the case in the southern towns of the county in those districts through which the Great Fire of 34 years ago swept and practically destroyed all the standing hardwood timber. So we do actually see the impact of the Peshtigo fire here. The fact that, a lot of these places used to run off of burning wood. All that wood, well, it did get burned, but not productively.
Just all at once.
And so now they need coal. So anyway, do you want to hear about the increased demand for field peas?
Lay it on me.
The primary cause of the increased demand for field peas in the last few years is said by a grain buyer to be due to this grain being used as an adulterant for spices. The health authorities, it says, of several states rather encourage the use of pea for this purpose than otherwise, as they're pronounced to be conducive to good health. This has been the means of creating a good demand for the small variety. Where they were formerly worth only 40 or 50 cents a bushel, they're now bringing nearly $1 per bushel.
Wow.
He's referring to the small variety of pea, which implies to me the existence of a large variety of pea, which I hope is like apple-sized.
That's what I was going to say.
I just assume every pea in a can is like a LaSure pea.
Yeah, as you should.
Also, this paper, the Sturgeon Bay Advocate, it was apparently in 1905 $1.50 a year to subscribe.
What a deal!
Which is funny because now that newspapers are like desperate for readers, now like a lot of the digital deals are basically that, where it'd be like, oh, $1 gets you a year access to, the Toledo Blade, whatever it may be. I think I literally did pay that to get access to the Post Crescent here. So yeah, time is a flat circle. I think that's all I have here.
Cool. Well, that was a pretty good discussion of the RJ Hackett and why she's important. But more importantly, it was an excuse to have Kaylee come join us again and talk about Great Lake shipwrecks.
Literally anytime.
I know. Me and Tanner were like going through the notes, and he was like, "Should I ask Kaylee?" I'm like, "Yeah, let's do it."
I will note that was in my head because Kaylee had commented on our thing on our post, which is to say, to anyone else, like, we don't really reach out cold to contact people, so you really do have to tell us that you want to come on the show.
What it was I saw y'all mind if we go back to the Great Lakes, and I was like a couple beers in, so I was like, call me, boys. I believe it's exactly what I wrote.
Yeah, so yes, you have to do that if you want to be on the show, because we probably won't reach out to you first. So
yeah. So thanks for joining us. It was awesome. That was fun.
Thank you for having me.
Any hints on what next week's topic is?
Actually,
I guess we have a bonus episode.
We do have a bonus, and for that bonus, actually, this is good because we are going to watch the Netflix documentary on the Titan submersible. What's it called?
I just saw it on like the homepage too.
I watched the HBO one, and that one's very good.
It's called Some Dumbass Gets Turned into a Fruit Roll-Up.
I know, it's funny. I didn't realize there were two for the longest time, and then Tanner was like, "Ooh, let's